What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does the day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Hides. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them and you deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this birth story family. Hi, today I have Emily and Carey with me that are here to talk about their very exciting documentary, These Are My Hours. So welcome, you guys.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I am so excited to be with you. And Emily, I'm not even really sure how we got connected, but I remember meeting you in person at a childbirth education series with Dr. Sarah Buckley.
She's fabulous.
The fabulous. She's also going to be on the podcast.
Amazing.
In a couple of weeks, talking about the physiology of birth. But we did get a chance to meet at that continuing education program. And I've since then watched your documentary twice, bawled my eyes out. So I cannot wait to share the empowerment of this documentary with all of our listeners and hope that everyone will subscribe to it. So we have so much to unpack. Let's start with, I was hoping that you might share with the listeners the very beginning of your documentary, because it is, you had me from the moment it started, and you're going to have this whole audience. So why don't you walk us through kind of what that platform is and that very beginning of your documentary?
Okay. So the very first line in the film is as follows. Here's the story I was told. A woman in labor is a vessel for a baby, and she needs a room full of help to be that vessel. Here's the story I'm telling. And that's shown over black. And the intent of starting the film that way is to really illustrate the fact that when I was pregnant with my first baby, the message that I got kind of from culture was that my rights as a person were changed, that I was existing only as a literal vessel to bring forth this baby, and that I didn't have within myself the means and the power to bring forth the child on my own, that I literally needed a room full of help to get there. And I wanted to tell a completely different story because my journey has proved to me that it was wrong, what I was told.
And let's take a minute and just tell everyone behind your voice in this documentary who you are.
The woman behind the voice. I'm Emily Graham. I am a birth worker, a mother, an educator, a fiery little lady who just had my life changed through the experience of giving birth to my first child, and kind of was put on a path of feminist birth activism and midwifery studies. And that's what I've dedicated the last 10 years of my life doing. And so I was just beyond excited to be able to do a legit documentary about autonomous birth.
Oh, yeah. And it's legit. It's good.
So legit.
It's good. So, Carey, tell us about you.
I became a midwife between 2008 and 2010. And I've, worked all around avenues of birth and lactation, doula work or midwifery or classes or lactation stuff. And, the documentary was a chance to incorporate the other aspects of my life not related to healthcare, which are primarily artistic, and to use that as an educational medium. We've taken the film in the last year around to academic settings and community settings all around the country, spoken to young people not yet having babies, spoken to people with challenging geographic or demographic situations, and formed our own trauma-informed childbirth education model as a result, and gotten to spread the conversation about not just home birth. It's much larger than that. It's about physiology in general, what is possible, about autonomy, about the family and community, about what the media shows us about physiologic events and how that translates into our beliefs about our bodies and stories. And it's just really been an incredible marriage of all of my life's passions to work with the film.
Yeah. So, and I'm just going to be transparent because I'm sitting over here listening and learning and interviewing and hoping to share with my audience. But I very much am a product of all of the messages of the media, down to even the way that I practice in my doula business. And so watching the documentary was very eye-opening, and I hope to just continue to learn more from you guys today about empowering women to be able to birth undisturbed, without, like you said, without being in a room full of people trying to help you do what your body was born to do. So I thank you guys so much both for being here. Now, Carey, you mentioned something that just makes me have a deeper question for you on your childbirth education series. And I was wondering how you are defining trauma.
Trauma is the experience basically of severe psychological distress. Typically, our goal is to speak to all systems and individuals to sensitize them to an individual experience.
Okay.
Basically, that you never know what a person may be bringing. There's just no guarantee of any kind. And so we all have to behave with respect and dignity and approach sensitively a person's body.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. And it's different than I was even thinking. So it broadens the scope of what was on my mind and what was
there's religious trauma. It's not just sexual trauma. It's authority trauma. It's, people may have had parents or other caregivers or authoritarians or teachers or whoever, and then you're between their legs talking hatefully to them. Everybody needs to take a step back in all medical and all settings, actually, and become more sensitized to how we speak and behave, but especially in life-altering experience when you're near birth or death or, extreme emotion. There just needs to be a pause.
Yeah. Another thing that comes to mind is like the structural racism that we have in our medical care today too. So I'm really excited to hear that you guys are building a childbirth education series that's going to address all of that work. It's ringing a bell. There was an episode on the podcast earlier with the CEO of Can Do Kiddo, a really cool woman that does occupational therapy. And the week before she gave birth, her father passed away abruptly. And we did a lot of unpacking on how that birth experience for her ended up being a little bit dark and a little bit traumatic because she wasn't able to clear her grief, before she went into, spontaneous labor. So
trauma is extremely complex. Extremely. And it's defined so differently by every individual, and it can be triggered by so many different things. So just informing everyone of the nuances around it, both the consumer and providers, there's a lot of emphasis put towards providers to become trauma informed. Yeah. But consumers being aware that there could be these situations that, like you're saying from the beginning, 92% of people, and even people in the other 8%, they may be bringing in things, or the practitioner, no matter where they are, what setting they're in, can have their own baggage to unpack also.
Yeah. I've been doing birth work for 15 years, and I I don't think I've attended a birth yet where we didn't have to, at least emotionally, unpack some things before they were able to be prepared for their birth. And often I end up sending my clients out to do a lot of like therapy just in preparation. So I'm excited to see where you guys take this, and I'm going to follow your journey. And before we dig in a little bit more to the documentary, where does everyone listening find you and find the film These Are My Hours?
So the film you can find on social media, and our handle is These Are My Hours everywhere. Very simple. TheseAreMyHours.com is our website. You can purchase a screening license there, a DVD, a digital copy. You can rent the film. It's all linked from our website. And our personal website is emilyandcarey.com, EMILYANDCAREY.
Okay. I will chime in and say, well done on your website, because it's so easy to purchase. I mean, it took like maybe less than 2 minutes to like click the link, purchase, and then I was watching it on my phone. So it was really
That's
easy.
because
That's a new
Emily's
skill of mine.
amazing
Yeah.
on all computer skills.
So anyone listening, that takes 2 minutes. It's really easy. And the film is about 52 minutes long. Yep. And so it's well worth an hour of your day, and you're going to want to watch it over and over and over again. So let's kind of dig into your birth story. This film is a testament and a documentary of you giving birth to your 4th child.
Yes.
And so before we get to the actual film, tell me about, just really briefly, your first 3 births.
Yeah. So I could probably tell a very similar story for all of my births. I'm a bit unusual in that I have never had a trauma in my births. I chose a home birth midwife for my first pregnancy after learning about home birth before I was ever planning to get pregnant, and had made the decision that I was going to have a home birth back then. So it was simple for me. And my birth was like the dream first birth. I was in labor for 6 hours. The midwife was at my house for 2 hours. It was like 4 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. It was like the highlight of my life. And I climbed up on every rooftop I could find and proselytized to people about how amazing home birth is. And my second birth was so fast that I learned that I should probably not be on a soapbox, because maybe everyone wouldn't want to experience something that was that intense. So I learned my lesson just to, keep my wisdom to myself and give it to people when they asked instead of forcing it on them. So my second was born at home. His labor was 90 minutes long. And then my third was born with Carey at home. That was maybe 2 hours, totally straightforward. And so, I kind of had trust in my body and kind of joyful births, which was a gift from my mother, who had simple pregnancies and births and always passed along the message that pregnancy and birth were beautiful, amazing, joyful experiences. So I didn't bring fear with me from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I feel really fortunate about now, working in this field, knowing how many people do bring fear with them.
Yeah, let's go with that for a little bit too, because as a doula, I'm more on the emotional and physical support rather than like on the medical side. And as an emotional and physical support person, my clients typically hire me very early, maybe, when they're 8 or 9 weeks along. And so I'm able to kind of journey with them throughout their entire pregnancy. And all of my clients are usually birthing in the hospital, but the majority of the work that I do throughout the pregnancy is having to undo the messages that they're getting from their healthcare provider, telling them that their baby is in danger, that they are doing something wrong if they don't get, induced at 39 weeks. If they have any little thing, it's like their whole pregnancy, every visit is just kind of a fear-based visit rather than an empowering visit. And so I wanted you to share with me, since we're talking about the documentary and that 4th baby, what it's like to be preparing for a home birth throughout your pregnancy and how those visits, what that looks like as your belly is growing and your baby is growing. So not just the birthing part, but to get to that birthing part in that good place, I imagine that there are many steps with your midwife that help to empower you along the way so that when the day of labor arrives, it sounds like you were prepared, you were confident, and that you weren't afraid of the process, that you knew you were having a healthy baby.
Well, with my first and third pregnancies, I had a new midwife to me. And so I had a lot of official prenatal care with those pregnancies. And both times, although one of them was a CNM doing home birth and one was a CPM doing home birth. And so outwardly, you would think their practices would be very different. But really, most of the time was spent just getting to know each other. I think both of the midwives that I saw, we had 2-hour appointments, either in their small office or
that was always my standard, definitely.
Or at my house, mostly. And we just talked about stuff, about everything, about my relationship and about my food, my diet, about how I was feeling, about my dreams, about my sleep, about my dreams for the birth, about how my husband was doing. And then also just the state of the world, whatever comes up, right? Pregnant people are always very open and vulnerable to what's going on in the world around them. And so,
which is where the definition of trauma gets tricky, right? Like when something that's going on in the news right now is happening, I think of every woman getting ready to have her baby and what her nervous system is going through, even though it's not directly occurring to her body, her person. They're very open, very sensitive.
Yeah, so they end up really being more like a counselor who then at the end of that time together, instead of me just leaving, they kind of check my vital signs and rest assured that all is well. And it almost always is. I mean, most people who are informed in planning home births are healthy people, and they don't have very many pre-existing health concerns. And so largely everything's normal. And it always was the case for me. And sometimes I would learn things about myself. Like I have an overactive insulin response. And so I tend to get hypoglycemic. And so I learned that through my prenatal care and take better care of myself through my diet now. And then, so with my second and fourth pregnancies, I was seeing the same midwife I had seen for the birth before that. And largely I had what's called a free pregnancy, meaning I gave myself prenatal care largely. I, checked my own blood pressure and talked to my baby and ate a lot of good food and saw them to talk when we did. We didn't have any official dates. I was working with both of them during those times. So we were seeing each other for work and we would spend some time talking about me and how I was doing, which just felt like what I wanted.
Yeah.
The support that I wanted. Yeah.
Sounds like making a new friend.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what I'm hearing.
It's a very intimate thing to have someone at your birth. And that intimacy and trust takes some time and energy to develop. And then it actually goes better.
Yeah. And this is a fear and a concern for many women that are delivering in a hospital because the standard of care is that you would deliver with a large practice and they even make you rotate providers throughout your pregnancy. So many moms that come to me say, I'm hiring a doula because I just want continuity of care. Yeah. I want to know that at least you and my partner are going to be there. I have 2 people I can rely on since I don't know who the nurse will be or as they change shifts or leave me. I think that's also something that I've noticed that really deeply affects a woman in labor at the hospital is that she'll build a relationship with her bedside nurse and then they leave her.
Right.
And then the process starts all over again. So I just love hearing you talk about a 2-hour prenatal appointment and building a relationship. Of course, that would help, eliminate any fears and trauma and make you feel heard and listened to.
Right.
I remember
And there's a lot to hear. People's
Yeah.
sexual experiences or beliefs on what this baby brings into the new family, what their fears are about finances or the future, or, they don't have to go into everything, everyone, but if something is an impediment,
Mm-hmm.
it may come up in labor, even if just in the mind, it may come up in the body in some way. And if there's not a comfort of dialogue, to say these things have come up for me, then you have an awkward space in labor.
Yeah.
I know that I could not have had a birth that would have felt satisfying to me in a hospital setting. I think I would have had a quote, fine birth because they were fast. There wouldn't have been a lot of time for people messing with me or doing interventions on me. But I was very specific about what I wanted. And if you watch the film, you will see that. And it's really not common. What I want is to not be touched or talked to almost ever. And I can't imagine going into a hospital room with people I have never met and them assuming that's what I wanted, or being okay with not speaking or not touching me, never giving me a vaginal exam, maybe never listening to the baby's heart tones because it bothered me. I would have spent a lot of time fighting about what I didn't want. And maybe my birth would have been long, or maybe it would have been challenging in some other way because I would have been pulled out of the deep, deep brainwave state that I was in.
Yeah. Now, I have a question about that. So as you watch the film, These Are My Hours, and you see the birth of your daughter, Ramona, what you speak about is the fact that primarily this film just pictures you laboring. Now, your midwife is there, and your husband is there, and your mom is there, but they are all distant from you, close enough that they're right there if you need them. But they have given you all of the power to believe in you, to give you space, to keep you really unobserved also and undisturbed.
Ironically, right?
Except for you have a camera on you.
There are 13 people. And 3
cameras in the ceiling and
3
people
cameras,
wearing cameras and
microphones.
driving
Oh my
cameras.
gosh.
And
But ironically, I felt completely unobserved.
Yes. And but it's so funny for you to say that, because when you watch the film, I would have I guess that makes sense, right? That there's a film crew. But as you watch it, the film it makes it appear as if you are completely unobserved and undisturbed.
Because
so
that's how
well
I
done.
felt.
So well done.
They were amazing.
Whatever you were experiencing, I think was perfectly captured, because I was just emotional the entire time watching the strength of you saying, I can do this. And I wanted to interject. Your husband, this film is so powerful. I'm watching your husband sit in a chair as the baby's birthing, and he lets you have sacred time alone with your baby while he's pouring tears.
You can hear him.
Yeah. I mean, just pouring tears.
Weeping.
But he doesn't race to you. He doesn't race to your side. He allows you to it was like you went into a prayer position over your baby, having this moment of, and you just said, you said over and over again, we did this, meaning you and your baby is what it felt like. And then I'm like we did this. And there was this long period of time where your midwife and your husband and your mom not only let you birth, but you're still in labor because your placenta, you haven't even entered the 3rd stage of labor yet. And your support team just allowed you to do what you were born to do. And so your husband is sitting in the chair and just allowing you that sacred time. And you said, that's a love that you don't often hear about, when your husband trusts in you during your labor. And I just thought that was the most well said line of the documentary, is you believing in yourself, but also your midwife allowing you that space, and especially your partner, allowing you to, when you watch the movie, you will see Emily making her primal sounds, experiencing the sensations of labor that always aren't so comfortable, and no one in the room panicking or trying to save you, right? Like, I took away from this film, like, you don't need to be saved. You just need to have everyone letting you do your thing. Now we're going to take a short break to just share a few things with you. Thanks for listening to the Birth Story podcast. I am so excited to announce the launch of my book, Birth Story, a 42-week guide for your pregnancy, a collection of these birth stories, a ton of doula advice, and journaling prompts. You can order a copy today at birthstory.com. It also will mean the world to me if you'll spread the word about this podcast. So on Stitcher or on iTunes, just leave a review. Thanks. So I want to know, what was your thing? Like, what were you doing? In the film, you hear you coaching yourself, but I was wondering if you had any kind of like hypnoanesthesia that you did for yourself or, a mantra. I want to know, like, what was going on in Emily's mind?
Yeah. So my birth preparation always is to just get really used to being in an altered state of consciousness. And pregnancy does that to you naturally. I mean, we fight it. We call it mommy brain and belittle it. But really, it's a chance for you to constantly be practicing how to get into meditative mind, to turn off the ego that thinks it's you. Like, it's funny you say I'm coaching myself, because there was like a part of me that isn't like me, the person living in this body, 38 years old, or, that me is the person that I'm coaching. But the person that's coaching that is like my essence, my intuitive mammalian self, who already knows how to give birth and knows that my human body ego is going to have hangups like, this hurts, or how long has it been, or what if this is going on, or whatever, And so my instinctual self, my meditative mind, is reminding like my ego self, it's okay. You know how to do this. I got you. Just, let the pain come, let it go. And so I wasn't consciously choosing those words. They were just pouring out of me, sort of like moaning does, or yelling does, like all the other panting, like during sex, during birth. Those things just come out of you, right? You don't have to decide what they're going to sound like. And so that's what the self-talk was too. So really, I just dropped down. And I think it's a gift that I've done that a lot my whole life. I've been called kind of spacey my whole life. And so I've been practicing since I was a child, I think, kind of just floating away from the body and kind of letting that space guide you. Yeah. And I think that's the point of hypnosis. It's just to get people there who aren't used to it, giving them a framework of how to get there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If they haven't been doing this since.
Yes, because we're very busy and we're very practical and we're very, very grounded.
Yeah.
And ironically in birth, you have to be like the most grounded you've ever been, and also just let yourself like blast off to the edge of the universe. So you have to like let yourself stretch in between both places and just try to exist in both places at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is, a bitch, but we do it. And that's why birth is so magic.
Yeah, so magic, because I do want to acknowledge too that there was a moment at the end of your birth that I witness all the time in natural childbirth. And again, I'm witnessing the births in the hospital setting and you're at home, but there was a moment where you had to reframe too, right? Like that really intense moment right at the end when you were like, ooh, that I don't know. I can't do this.
I don't do
this right. Like,
yeah.
And it's when like say Carey and I hear this, we're like, oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
Game on.
Right.
Did you intuitively know when you got to that point where you were like saying out loud and really having to coach yourself stronger? Like, did you intuitively know, okay, this is the end?
Well, I knew it was the end the whole time because my whole birth was basically pushing.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of the film, I'm kind of wandering around and then I go into the bathroom and I feel my waters leaking down my leg. And the film crew had just shown up maybe 15 or 20 minutes before that. And my thought was, oh shit, there is not going to be a movie. This, like, my bad, you guys. Hope you can do a lot with 20 minutes of footage. And so I was like, well, whatever. So I went to the place where I wanted to give birth and I expected the baby to come within the next 5 or 10 minutes. And she just didn't. And she didn't. And it was 90 minutes of pushing. And that's, even with my first birth, I maybe had half an hour of like not intense pushing. So it was very unusual for me. And I knew there was something off, I guess, about that. And she was in what they call in the obstetrical world deep transverse arrest, meaning her head was turned to the side and deflexed, and she was just not moving through the pelvis despite the strong contractions. And so I was, it was hard. It was like the end of transition, moving to pushing for 90 minutes straight. And, those of you with long labors, I accept the smack across the face for me saying that it was a long time. But for me, it really was. And it was painful because there was no movement, no change. And so I was in that space where it's like, I can't do this anymore. I'm done for a long time. But at the end of every contraction, I was like, I'm not done. It's okay. Like, we could do another one. But the peak of every contraction, it was that transition point where you're like finished with this forever. And I didn't know that was going to change until it really suddenly changed. And I could feel her head just like pound down into my pelvis. And you could see the adrenaline kick in the film. Like, I pop up and my eyes get kind of crazy. And I'm like, whoa, okay, well. And then I knew it was the end.
And I think
which is right after you say something like, why is this so hard for me?
And weeping a little.
Which is, always the recognizable, like, okay, now we're really here.
Now that she's willing to weep, we're getting somewhere. Yeah.
And that's universal, home, hospital, everywhere.
Yeah. That's what I think is so beautiful about sharing the film in front of a live audience, because a lot of the people that come haven't had a home birth. Like, a lot of people haven't had a home birth. And people always come up to me afterwards and pick out these little moments where it relates exactly to something they did in their birth, or even if they had a cesarean in their postpartum or in their early labor, or something that I say to myself that's like speaks exactly to them and their experience. And I just find that so beautiful that it's not like you don't have to have, I'm not saying you should even have a birth like this. This is just what my birth was like, but it's just a human experience, Yep. Yeah.
Well, a couple things that just stood out to me in the film is that you didn't have any vaginal exams. You didn't.
Oh, I did. They were by me.
Oh, you were doing.
I mean, I was feeling
I saw you looking down. I was like, I wonder what she's doing.
I wasn't checking my cervix. I was checking her head because she wasn't. Nothing was changing. I was expecting for her to be born because I was pushing, and so I felt, and I could just feel that her head was not coming out yet.
And because this was an operation of a business with a lot of different contracts and legal consulting and everything else, we weren't in a relationship of that nature where there was a provider expectation to perform those things, because it was not, the focus of her desire, but also of the film. And so there was not a space for some of the things that you might typically expect.
And I would have asked if I wanted her to, and I did. There was a point where I thought, should I ask Carey to do something or to say something or something? Like,
well, we share some eyes that you can notice if you're looking for it, where we're like, I'm like, all right,
she's asking me,
and she
is it okay? Or, with her eyes, and I'm like shaking my head like, nothing. But then I thought to myself, really, what would she do?
Right.
She can't get the baby. She can't yank the baby out of there. what else is there to do?
And you were in a beautiful body-led position, right? So you were talking about how your back was hurting, which would indicate the baby's position.
Mhm.
And you were naturally leaning forward over the bed. Every time, you kind of stopped or walked, you would move in a forward leaning position. And then the remainder of the birth is next to the fireplace in your living room in a deep squat, almost kind of turned to the side, which I believe is, I'm assuming that you didn't go, oh, I should lean to the right, but your body told you to lean to the right because of the way your baby's head was positioned,
Mhm.
because you allowed space to listen to what your body was telling you to do. Because if someone else was guiding you, they may have wanted you to squat in a centered position or squatted more left leaning, but your body knew exactly what was comfortable-ish,
Right.
right, by being in a deep squat and tilted to the right, which allowed your baby's head to turn finally
Right.
and come down and come out. So,
And you can see in one scene, I'm pushing on my, like right above my pubic bone with my hand, which I didn't remember doing, which would make sense to kind of like give pressure to the baby to kind of like slide under the pubic bone.
yep. And then you birthed her.
I finally did.
And it was amazing. And I wanted to know how long you had many undisturbed minutes, if not longer than that, with the baby. And but in reality, how long was it before you felt the placenta releasing and delivered your placenta?
Oh, goodness. I have no idea. What do you
About
think?
the same as what it looks like. I mean, it was,
Under 10 minutes.
yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay. I wasn't sure if there was editing there or if it was about an accurate timeline.
Yeah,
There's
usually.
overall
So-
a little, bit of time alteration, but that's mostly accurate.
So your placenta released on its own without Pitocin.
As they do.
Yep. There was minimal bleeding.
Yeah.
And then you lay on the couch and she finds her way without anyone's hands or prompting to her first very strong, latch. And there was just this beautiful moment with you guys on the couch. And still, there was moments where you could see that your husband was kind of serving you, like making you a glass of water or bringing you things. But I believe that, the purpose of your film is to show women that they can do it all by themselves.
Yes, that they can, and they don't have to. Some people really like to have a lot of support, and some people like to have medication, or they like to have the safe feeling of the medical team at the hospital or whatever. Like, people really should do what they want. But I think that it does us a disservice in our culture to assume that everybody needs that or wants that. I think that they should know that there's an option to do it a different way, and that really, barring any unusual health issue, that your body does know how to do it. Like, look around at the planet. There's a couple people here. It's the birth process does work, right? Like,
And the help is much better placed after.
yes, you can
That's
see.
well seen in the film too. Like, you need help walking and managing your bleeding where it is
bathing.
on the body in
Yes.
the house. And, there's just plenty of support that we're less comfortable as a culture offering instead of saving folks or scaring folks.
Yes. And Carey, you were there right away. And I had a question on what the cord was tied with. I saw you snip something and I was like, well, that doesn't look like something I've seen in the hospital before.
We had done a blessing way, I think, where we used that cord maybe to go around between.
I think it's one that your child
individuals.
made.
And yes, my child Eden did a finger knitted cord tie that we sterilized to use for the baby.
It was so beautiful. I just saw this moment of something I hadn't seen before and I just wanted to see what it was. And then another thing was, right at the end too, Carey comes over and says, do you want the herbs or do you want the ibuprofen? And you're like, all of it, right?
Right.
Like the baby is out and we've had this, and now, I'm ready to, have some intervention.
Totally.
And Can we talk about what those herbs are that you may recommend post-birth along with ibuprofen?
Yeah, that ibuprofen usually goes on board pretty quick.
Right.
We did CalMag, liquid CalMag, every few hours.
And I had tinctures of cramp bark, ghost pipe, which is an unusual one, catnip.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's it. Maybe there was another one. So I took a dropper full of each of the tinctures and 2 tablespoons of liquid calcium magnesium and 600 ibuprofen every 4 hours for the first day or so. Well, not the ibuprofen. I took that like as, on the bottle. I took that for the first day. And then I took the herbs and the calcium magnesium for a few days for after pains because I get them pretty strong. They make me really uncomfortable. It's like going into labor again for the first couple of days. And I just really wanted to enjoy my postpartum and not be writhing while I nursed.
Yeah.
So I asked a mother of 11 children, what does she do for after pains? Because they usually get stronger with each child. And I brought a notebook and wrote down everything she said. And I did everything she said. And we added ghost pipe because we know that's good for pain.
And you also were really mindful of keeping your bladder empty and of pushing out clots right after the birth rather than a lot of fundal massage or anything like that. You don't see the conversation about it in the film. You see her squat in the shower and she's pushing clots out, but that's the natural way to do that instead of someone doing it to you in that really painful way. So she just continued, keeping her uterus empty and resting pretty radically in the postpartum
I had
to
a radical
reduce
rest.
Yeah.
I did nothing.
Quite
really,
a lot of broth.
All the things that you tell people to do for the postpartum, all the things that are in all the best postpartum books out there right now. There's so many new postpartum books. Eat warming, liquid food, easy to digest. Don't get up, have a bunch of herbal tea, have people do stuff for you, be totally pampered. And I just went like all in on that. And it was like the most magical time of my life. It was so worth it. I spent all the money and got a postpartum doula to come for 8 hours every week and enlisted my family to do specific things. And it was so worth it. It was so worth it.
Yeah. And then the film ends. I mean, this is where I really started bawling because, maybe I shouldn't give it away. Nope, let's not give it away. You have to watch the film, everybody. The film,
you want to cry.
Yeah. The end of the film is going to make your heart melt, make you bawl, grab some tissues. The finale is incredible. And everyone just is going to have to watch it. And they want to know what it is. We're just going to leave it at that. But there's a really, really cool moment at the end. And so I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing so much of this story, because it's very important to me that I've grown a platform to talk about birth stories and that my own personal experience exists in a hospital setting. But I'm trying to open up to all of the ways in which we do give birth and can give birth, so that anyone who's listening that's either pregnant or planning their pregnancy knows that home birth is an option, that home birth with a doula or with touch or support is an option. Home birth undisturbed is an option. All of those things at a birth center or at a hospital are also options. But really getting to that point where you address your fears and your trauma and you build a relationship so that you are prepared for, a beautiful birth. And so that's why I wanted to interview you guys today. Is there anything else on your heart that we can leave with our listeners?
I have something. In speaking to this being the Birth Story podcast, I really want to impress upon people that our intent with this film is not to have a platform where we state that anyone should do anything. And really, our point is that a birth story is worthy of a full feature documentary. It's worthy of someone making a unique score, musicians spending their time composing music to play over the film. It's worthy of a whole documentary crew flying across the country to film it. And it's worthy of being a piece of art simply because it's a birth.
Yeah.
And that's the point of the film, really, is that this act that we do to bring life into the world is a piece of art, and it is worthy of being its own story, not just a punchline in a larger story, the way it's usually shown. But it itself is the hero's journey.
Yep. I wish that I could have a composer play music over all of the stories that I have moms and their partners share on this podcast. Well, before we go, I just have one more thing. So I usually ask people what their favorite baby product is, but I'm not doing that today. I was hoping that you would just tell me 3 things to 3 people. So if you could tell Carey what you're most thankful for looking back on this documentary and your birth, and your husband and your mom that were there in the middle of the night with you.
And to get through all of those without weeping.
Well, you can cry. I'll cry too.
Okay. Oh, dear. Okay. Okay, so I'll start with my mom because I knew her first. Mom, you gave me such an incredible gift. You birthed me into the world with joy. You taught me that it's beautiful to be born. That's beautiful to grow a human. You taught me how to feed them with my body and not be ashamed of it. And you showed me that you trusted me to be an adult when you came to my birth and allowed me to step into my power and just silently watch me. Carey, you taught me how to be a better midwife. Teach me how to talk to people, how to listen to them, how to change, be humble, and then in the same moment be a badass. You kept me feeling safe, like I didn't have to worry about anything. I knew you were holding down everything. And you always do. And to Jason, thanks for letting me take on the mantle of the powerful one in our family. Thank you for knowing how to sit quietly and help me and not take over the experience, not question what I'm doing, never make me feel like I'm too much or scary or unsafe or unfit or unwell when I do something that's atypical, for always supporting me and for loving our baby so much.
I have tears. Too. Thank you. And I just wanted to say from me to you guys, thank you for this documentary and for sharing your story and for telling your story. Because after today, I'm changed forever. I have gone into every birth for 15 years believing that I needed to coach, that I needed to touch, that I needed to support, and no one had ever opened my eyes to maybe that's not what the mom needed. And so my practice is forever going to be changed too. And for this, I thank you guys for being here. All of the ways to get in touch with you will be linked in the show notes. And I hope everyone gets the finale of your story by going to your website, These Are My Hours, and within just a couple clicks, buying your documentary and watching it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heidi.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will feel empowered by the end of your pregnancy to speak up, plan and prepare for the birth you want, no matter what